Hey guys, this is Baileywiki. We're going to do something different today. I've asked my Patreons to, if they'd like to, submit a map, which you are looking at one such map from Herve. He says I can call him Harvey. I think he's French. This is a map that he built of a granary for a storyline that he's running. And he asked me if I could dirty it up a little bit, which led to a Discord discussion about how would I approach a map like this. And so what we're going to do today is a time-lapse video of me spending a number of hours rebuilding this map in my style using some of my methods. Some of the things that I'm going to be focused on are I'm going to unify the artwork. So you see a mix of artwork in here, some cartoony stuff, some Forgotten Adventures, some Tom Kartos. I'm going to unify these and I'm going to try to get everything consistent. I'm going to throw out anything that looks cartoony. I'm also going to throw out all the roofs that you see. They're too shiny to really kind of make them dirty, and plus they don't really match the artwork. So I'm going to do all custom roofs. I'm not even going to use anything in Dungeondraft. I'm not going to use anything from Forgotten Adventures roof pack. I am going to use some Forgotten Adventures textures, but that's it. And then I'm going to mix the ground. I'm going to get away from some of the cartoony ground that you've got here, and I'm going to use some other textures mixed in together. You're going to see me focus on shadows, which is no big surprise. I'm going to develop the color palette in general so that everything kind of agrees. And then I'm also going to separate all these roofs from the buildings, and I'm going to actually build out the buildings themselves, not the interiors, but I'm going to make it so that in a future build, I can, or you can, if you like this map, build out the interiors. Of course, I'm going to dirty the thing up considerably, and I'm going to add a whole level of detail around it. So with that, let's kind of get started with it. And yeah, I'm going to run this at pretty high speed, so hopefully you get an idea of what's happening. First thing I'm going to do is block out all of the areas of the map that I want to block out. I'm using a transparency to do this. And I'm getting all of my cobbles to face the right way because you can see that I'm using a cobble brush as well. And you'll see why I'm doing that in a second. Now I'm going to start playing around with different textures until I find one that I like, a combination of textures that I like. My goal here is to still have it be a city or a town with some level of paving, but to have a significant amount of mud coming through it. Now I'm framing up the streets in a way that I think makes sense. I'm going to have horses and carriages and other things in my party coming through. I'm trying to get these streets and these little bits of sidewalk kind of laid out in the right way. I'm using what I think are complementary textures and colors for all of this. And I'm doing another reference back to the original picture. Sorry, I backed the camera up a little bit there accidentally. I put curbs all around, and now I'm using that brush to paint in these cobbles in a way that I think makes sense. I don't want to leave any straight edges. And I'll use the wibbly wobbly line and some shadow paths to kind of set this curb up off of the ground a little bit. Just helps create some three-dimensionality with the map itself. And right now these are just pads. I'll eventually put walls in here. But you can see I use shadows early on to just try to get a sense of the space. And I want to break it up a little bit. I don't want it to be all the same materials. So here I've got a wooden sort of deck for that particular building. Change the curb style around it. And from a color perspective, I like to darken that a little bit, make it match the kind of somber mood of the rest of the map. Again, just wanted to break it up, make sure it's not too uniform all around. Still not sure I like the options that I picked. I'm investigating a little bit further. Then I find the muds, and of course, I'll end up finding my way back there and really landing on a mix of a mud and another like dirt texture. I don't like that cracked floor, but as I start to land on this dirt combined with mud, it's starting to really look like what I'm going for. And now I'm just checking out different paths and wheel paths to see what I like. And I'm imagining how vehicles are moving through these curves and into this town. I'm trying to make it look like there's an amount of traffic that's been through here. And I am trying to fade it out when I come to cobble so it really does look like the wheels went from, wet mud to hard cobble. Here, I just decided those are too light, so I'm just very quickly skimming over them with a shadow tool. Just again, so I can draw a little bit more attention to them because it's hard to see. And now what I want to do is I want to see if I can build a concept of having a walkway that, and if you've ever been in a city like this, it's extremely muddy, you'll know that people there will lay down wooden boards and go from building to building to get over some of these things. And so I realized that I could do that and I could make it look like those boards were covered in mud themselves. Then I just had to figure out how to make it look like the board was continuing on. And fortunately, because I'm using all Forgotten Adventure assets, they all fit perfectly together. I think that makes for a really nice effect. And I'm just gonna try to finish these off a little bit by giving them some wibbly wobbly lines. I'll add some shadows as well, just so it feels like the board is its own physical piece of matter. Kind of move the rest of this part quickly. You can see the attention to detail is pretty extreme, but you know, when your players are moving through this and they're zoomed in, you kind of want it to be. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking the cloud tool, or I'm taking the cloud object, and I'm spamming that around just to really kind of muck up uh, the entire map. It's set at transparency in, you know, like a greenish gray color. And now I'm assessing my map and figuring out what I want to build into it. I am referring back to Harvey's map, and he's got a couple of living trees. And I thought, well, for this environment, I thought dead trees might make some more sense. And so I tried to identify where on the map could a tree potentially be growing. This is important, just like anything else, get those trees to blend into the environment. And now Harvey also had a lot of carts and carriages sort of strewn about the map. I'm going to try to put them in here in, I don't know, what I feel like is a semi-coherent way. And I'm going to alternate between the carts. I'm going to put a couple of wagons in here as well. I think the wagon asset from Forgotten Adventures is really outstanding. I've never used it before, so I wanted a chance to use the wagons here. Trying to use the ashen color scheme here just so everything generally agrees. You can always use different types of wood, but you're going to want to use it kind of in a uniform way so that things don't stick out. Now, since this is a granary, I thought there's probably going to be a lot of flour and grains and stacks of things sitting around in general, which Harvey also had that same idea. If you look at his map, he's got a lot of those as well. Here I'm just trying to do just little fine tuning, making sure that everything is like shaded properly and kind of nestled into its little space there. This is a darker map, so I don't mind adding a little extra shading to it to really kind of set the mood. So here we're working on just some more touches here. I thought that these trees needed a place to grow. They wouldn't just grow out of the cobble, so I'm creating some planters for them. These planters are going to be overgrown and muddy and barely visible in this map, but you know, I do plan on making other versions of this map where the mud's gone, it's a proper city square, and by putting this stuff in here now, it not only helps make these trees make sense, but also gives me a starting point for the new version of this as well, which you'll also get a preview of in this at the end of this video. Is this map being used for being reskinned as like an actual proper city square. And I'm just doing some embellishment here. It's making stuff up, but it's trying to do something that looks like it's got a little bit of design to it. You know, I could have just made a circle there and that would have been fine, but this makes it look more like, you know, something you would see. Now I'm building out the walls. I am changing from the stock ashen color to something a little bit darker to match the rest of the motif. And you'll notice that I'm using different materials. A lot of map makers will build an entire city with the same walls, and you just never see that in real life, and it's not as interesting. It's not as eclectic. So, you know, I've used a mix of wood and wooden plaster, cobble, brick, and I think just makes for a better design. And you can see I'm doing all of my shading. I'm not going to build the actual interiors, but I do want to set them up so that they can be done here in the future. And I will do that with this map when as I release different versions of it. Now we're going to the roof level. I'm on a separate level called roofs. I made it so that you could see through to the level below. And you'll see I'm not using any of the roof tools or options that are presented really with anyone, except that I'm using Forgotten Adventures. This is I think it's the gray brick texture, and I'm just coloring it different ways. Now, doing roofs is hard. Your brain has to bend a certain way, and mine doesn't do it naturally. So you're seeing this sped up quite a bit, but I did a lot of fiddling around to see how I wanted to approach my roofs in general. Those are stair rails of different materials. I'm using the wibbly wobbly line. And then of course I'm also going to be putting from Krager's pack the shading over these so that it looks like the sun's hitting it properly. And you'll see with those octagonal shapes, or I don't know if it's a hexagon, it's an octagon. Krager's pack works well here because it gives you pre-built at 75%, 50%, and 25%, where you can basically keep track of what you're using. And as you go around that octagon, it makes more sense. This may seem time consuming, and it certainly is, but I think the end result is just a lot better looking, especially for a map like this. You could get away with Forgotten Adventures and some other maps, but it just, I don't know, it doesn't have the realism effect that I really am searching for. So this ends up being what I think is a better alternative. You can see I'm using similar colors. I'm using the same color in other parts of the map. I'm trying not to make all of the roofs have the same color here. And you'll also notice that I'm using that same transparent shadow texture in order to cover up some of the shingles. I want to give these roofs a worn look. These are medieval roofs after all, and they've got some weather and things like that. It helps break up those big monotonous spaces as well. Now, when I do future versions of this map, I may change some of these roofs. So I'm keeping track of my hex codes that I'm using. And I may want to turn these roofs into, bright red or something like that at some future date. So keep track of your hex codes that you use. Try not to make every single roof a different hex code. That way it makes it easier to just find and replace and update your maps later. It's hard to see where these roofs separate in some cases. So it's probably going too fast to see, but I'm also playing around with just setting my lines in some cases. I've never built this many roofs before. And so I'm learning my own method here as I go. If you ever need a hint at what these should look like, you can always open up the Forgotten Adventures roof assets and see how they've laid out roofs for those assets. They can be pretty helpful. I didn't use that here, but it's always available in the objects if you have the module installed. Here I'm using some objects to make these wooden roofs look dilapidated. And I went with wood just in order to break up the, the style. Of course, I'm seeing through that level so that I can see where my fireplaces would go inside of the buildings. And then, of course, I'm using the shadows underneath the chimneys because they are standing up on top of the roof. Now what I'm doing is I'm going back to the ground level and I'm drawing where the shadows would cast. So assuming that the sunlight's coming from the top left, all of these roof lines would cast shadows underneath. And so you're seeing me account for those. I'm even showing how the shadow might fall there on that wagon. And then I'm spamming everything with the cloud tool like I did before, just dirtying everything up as much as I can. Adding another one of these kind of rounded roofs, I think it makes a good effect. And this is also what Harvey had in his map. And I'm even making the shadow for that rounded roof match it as well. Here I did put in, you missed this, because my recording failed, but I did put in lights, lanterns by all the doorways. I added a couple more embellishments. Here's the undertaker's shop. And of course I put in doors and windows as well, just showing you that I wanted to lay them out. I also put shutters on these windows. I think they add a nice effect. Some of them have shutters, some of them don't. It's just another way of breaking up the monotony. And now what we're going to do is work on the centerpiece of the map. So this is the granary itself, and then the attached sort of storage building. And, theoretically, this is where the industry of the town really happens. The granary is not supposed to have, according to lore, any open flames around it. So you'll see that I do not put lanterns around. It's going to be lit with, theoretically, with other methods. Here I landed on a concept for that front building is sort of a booth, if you will, big enough for a single token, an administrator that kind of logs in and out what's happening in terms of trades with flour and grain. Inside or sort of another sort of administrator and inventory management. Maybe these are tickets that are used to buy and sell and trade the flour that's maintained in stock. I used windows and then I used the light tool to show that sunlight was coming in. Again, no open flames within 10 feet of the granary because it's very flammable. So that's why I chose to do it that way. I am using the spline tool and I'm overextending because I want to make the curve the right curve. And then I'm just deleting the extra portions of the curve. So you can see where I go into the administrative house there. That's just to get the curve right. And of course I forgot my stools inside the administrative building. I'm just dressing up and touching up shadows. I'm putting some shutters in for that sort of kiosk. And you can embellish your shutters any way you want, or don't embellish them at all. Now we're going to start on the roof of the granary. And so from a design perspective, there's probably some more floors of this granary. They may all just be empty floors, but so this is, 3 or 4 stories up. And I'm using the same roof technique that you saw me use before. But I want to have a walkway around it. And since this granary should not have any wood near it, I said, let's make this metal. So I found this nice rusted metal texture. I'm using metal walls that I'm making look like supports. So I'm being really creative with my layers here. I'm on level 700 and at some points level 900 above the roof, above the wall line. And I think this makes for a really good look. It makes for a really good tactical map. If you turn this into a battle map and your party is up here on the third or fourth floor, fighting some large horde down below. And again, being creative with trying to make those supports look like they're underneath everything. The overall look ends up coming together really well, even though I'm really having to dance around the levels here. You can really paint yourself into a corner if all of a sudden you have no more levels to build on top of or below. That's feeling pretty good, but I realized that there's no way to get up to here. So I'm going to continue that spiral staircase all the way up. And so I'm cutting that out. I'm cutting out a space to bring in the staircase. And I'm going to somehow try to finish that so that it looks coherent. And even though no one's ever going to be on that staircase underneath, I want to be able to see through and see that there was a staircase under there. I'm just, again, creating just some more shadows to help separate that metal walkway from whatever's below it. And then I'm going to use the rusted stair rail path to try to finish off that piece and then give it some depth. That's feeling pretty good. Now down below, of course, I have to build the roof for this, but now I've got some challenges because I am starting to run out of levels to work from. So I'm going to try to make this roof underneath all the levels from the one before, and I'll have to end up using the spline tool to make it all work. You can see through it there. And I'm out of levels, so I ended up using the spline tool to bring it out from under there. And do the same thing here. You'll notice these shadows I'm drawing underneath. I'm also putting them at level 400 because I do want them to cast their shadow over everything underneath the roof line. And now you're going to think this is crazy. And if you saw my tower tutorial, you saw how I did this shadow. And this may be crazy, but I really like the idea of this large tower casting a big looming shadow over the ground below. And so I'm going to copy that shape and I'm going to set it to 50% opacity. And I'm literally going to put that shadow over everything. It's at level 900. I'm at the lower level now, and the shadow is being cast over the entire ground. Now, I don't want it to cast into the room, so I have to cut everything back. And there's a better way I could have done this if I planned better, but this is how I ended up doing it. So I end up spending, a decent amount of time here cutting that shadow back, deleting points without making it disappear. But the end result, I'm pretty dang satisfied with. I really like this idea of, as you're walking, as your group is walking through the town, there's this shadow that's cast on the ground around them. It really implies the height of this giant granary sitting in the middle of the map. And if I make variations, I change that from a granary to a guard tower or cathedral or something in the future, that shadow will change as well. And here, because the roof is significantly higher than the ground, the shadow's also being cast on the roof. But here's where I've had to change my levels just because I ran out of space. But it's still casting on the roof, but at a different place. So think about how shadows fall, and you may have to change. You have different elevations, kind of like how I did where it landed on the wagon earlier. And now I'm just going to finish off putting some deeper shadows around the whole building. It's so large that when you're looking at it from the roof, you still want to see some separation with the ground. And so that's it. I'm pretty happy with the way that tower turned out. It's great for a tactical map. Here you're seeing the original map that Herve drew, that's some of the original textures. And just to give you an idea of kind of where we came from and what we got to, I'm pretty happy with this result. I think this is a really nice map, and it's really flexible for lots of different things. And so I will show you here in a second an alternative to this. But if you'd like this map, or you'd like for me to do something similar to any of your maps, you can find me on Discord. It's a Patreon benefit that I'll do this. At least I'm trying it out, and I'll do this for Patreons moving forward. So I did told you I'd show you a variation of this. Here's the same map now cleaned up. I brushed away all of the, literally brushed away all of the mud. The trees are now alive. I left some of the other assets, but I cleaned things up considerably. I got rid of all of the spammed cloud assets. You can see the granary is now pristine and nice looking. It's got a wood base, wood supports. And this is just an example of how you can transform a map if you build it the right way, and you can use it for lots of different things. I will experiment with things to drop in the middle of this. I mentioned before. By the way, you can see the trees are gone now. They're on the roof line, but you can walk under the trees underneath that line. So hopefully you guys like this video. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make more of these, if this was the right length or format, if I should be doing anything different. And of course, if you would like to join my Patreon and support my work, this is something that I enjoy doing. And if you've got a map that you think you'd like me to reimagine for you or reapproach from a design perspective, that's and if you find this interesting and helpful, then I'm definitely open to doing it. You can find me linked out this video on my Patreon. Also on my Patreon is a link to my Discord. It should be linked on this video as well. But by all means, stop in, say hello, tell me you saw the video, and let me know what you'd like to see in the future. Thanks so much, and have a great time making maps, guys.